The war had ended long ago. The streets were rebuilt. The flags were changed. People moved on. But this house never did. At the edge of a quiet European town stood a small brick home, untouched by time. The paint was peeling. The windows were always shut. And inside, the clock on the wall had been broken since 1944. Every morning, Anna Keller, now in her late 40s, swept the same floor. Every evening, she placed 3 plates on the table, one for herself, one for her mother, and one for her brother Lucas. Lucas had gone to war when he was just 19, not as a hero, not as a volunteer, but because the war had come to his doorstep. He kissed his mother's hand, promised Anna he would return, and walked away wearing a uniform that never truly fit him. That was 20 years ago. No body was ever found, no grave, no confirmation, just silence. Their mother, Elizabeth, never accepted that Lucas was dead. She kept his room untouched. His coat still hung by the door. His letters stopped coming in 1943, but she waited anyway, because hope, once planted, refuses to die. On a cold morning in 1959, Anna heard a knock at the door. Not loud, not urgent, just polite. When she opened it, a postman stood there holding a single envelope, yellowed, worn, stamped with a date that made her hands tremble. 1944. The postman said softly, "Miss, this was found in a military archive. It belongs to you." Anna stared at the handwriting. She knew it. She had practiced it with her brother as children. Her fingers shook as she closed the door. For 20 years, they had waited for news. And now, the war had finally decided to speak. Anna did not open the letter immediately. She placed it on the kitchen table, right beside the cracked teacup her mother had used for years. The envelope looked fragile, as if even touching it too hard might erase what was inside. The stamp was faded. The edges were torn, but the handwriting was clear. Lucas Keller. Her brother's name had not been written anywhere in this house for 20 years. Anna sat down slowly, her breath shallow. Every memory she had buried came rushing back. Lucas laughing as he ran through the fields. Lucas teaching her how to ride a bicycle. Lucas standing in this same kitchen, awkward in his uniform, pretending not to be afraid. Her mother, Elizabeth, entered the room. She noticed the envelope immediately. Her hands froze mid-air. "Who is it from?" she asked, though her voice already knew the answer. Anna swallowed. "It's from the army." Elizabeth did not move. For 2 decades she had lived between hope and fear. Every knock on the door had been torture. Every silence had been worse. Anna gently placed the envelope in her mother's hands. Elizabeth sat down. Her fingers trembled as she traced Lucas's name, again and again, as if touching it could bring him back. "It's his writing," she whispered. "I would know it anywhere." But she did not open it. Instead, she held it against her chest, because opening it meant accepting that whatever was inside had survived, while her son had not. Minutes passed. The house was silent except for the ticking of the broken clock that had never worked again since Lucas left. Finally, Anna spoke. "Mother, we need to read it." Elizabeth closed her eyes. Slowly, carefully, she opened the envelope. Inside was a single folded letter. The paper was thin, stained in places, by rain, by dirt, by something darker Anna chose not to imagine. Elizabeth unfolded it with shaking hands. The first line made her gasp. "If you are reading this, then I did not make it home." Her breath caught. Anna felt her chest tighten. The letter continued. Lucas wrote about the cold, about the endless marching, about nights spent hiding in forests, listening to artillery shake the earth. He wrote that he was afraid, but not of death. He was afraid of being forgotten. Tell Anna she was right. The world is bigger than war. Tell Mother I tried to be brave. Elizabeth pressed a hand to her mouth to stop herself from crying aloud. Then came the line that broke her. "I am not writing this in battle. I am writing this while waiting." Waiting. Waiting for what? Anna read ahead, her eyes burning. Lucas explained that his unit had been surrounded. They had been ordered to hold their position. No food, no medicine, no hope of rescue. He had seen boys younger than himself fall silently beside him. "If this letter ever reaches you, please do not think I was alone. I thought of home every night." The last sentence was written shakily. "I hear footsteps now." There was no signature, no goodbye, just silence. Elizabeth dropped the letter onto the table. Her face was pale, empty, like someone who had been holding their breath for 20 years and had finally exhaled. "So," she said softly, "he waited, just like us." That night, for the first time since 1944, Elizabeth removed Lucas's coat from the door. She folded it neatly and placed the letter inside the pocket. The war had taken 20 years, but it had finally delivered its truth. The letter should have arrived in 1945. Instead, it arrived in 1964, and the reason was a man no one had ever noticed. His name was Carl Weiss. Carl was not a soldier. He was not a hero. He never carried a rifle. He carried letters. During the final months of the war, Carl worked as a temporary field post clerk near the Eastern Front. His job was simple: collect letters from soldiers and send them back home. Simple until the front collapsed. Bombs fell day and night. Railways vanished. Entire offices burned. One night, Carl was ordered to evacuate. He packed whatever he could carry. In a small canvas bag, he placed dozens of undelivered letters. Letters written by men who believed someone, somewhere, would read their final words. Among them was Lucas Keller's letter. Carl ran through smoke and fire, clutching the bag as shells exploded behind him. He survived. The letters did not, at least not officially. After the war, Carl returned to a country that barely recognized him. Cities were rubble. Records were gone. People were too busy surviving to ask about missing mail. Carl kept the bag. At first, he told himself he would deliver them soon. Then weeks turned into months, months into years. Life moved on, but the letters stayed. They sat in a wooden chest under Carl's bed. Every night he could feel them there. He never opened them. He didn't need to. He knew what they were. Final words, confessions, apologies that arrived too late. Years passed. Carl married. His hair turned gray. The war faded into history books, but the chest remained. Every time he tried to throw it away, his hands froze, because somewhere he knew those letters were the last proof that these men had existed. In 1963, Carl fell ill. Doctors said he did not have long. One evening, alone in his apartment, he opened the chest for the first time in 20 years. He read names, hundreds of names. Most were crossed out in old military records. Missing, presumed dead, no known grave. Carl cried for people he had never met. That night, he made a decision. If he was going to die, he would not take their voices with him. Over the next months, Carl wrote to every address he could still find. Many letters came back marked unknown or family deceased. Some doors never opened, but a few did. That is how Lucas's letter found Anna and Elizabeth. Carl never met them. He did not sign his name. He simply mailed the envelope and waited. 2 weeks later, Carl passed away quietly in his sleep. When his apartment was cleared, the chest was found empty. Only one note remained inside. "I am sorry I was late." Anna would never know Carl's face, but because of him, Lucas's voice crossed 20 years of silence. The war had stolen lives, but time had stolen answers, and one old postman had tried, too late, to return them. The house did not feel the same after the letter arrived. Nothing had changed. The walls were the same. The furniture was old. The clock still ticked. But the silence was heavier. Anna did not speak much anymore. She would sit at the kitchen table, the letter folded carefully beside her, staring at nothing. For 20 years she had lived with one belief. Lucas never came back because he couldn't. Now she lived with a worse one. Lucas never came back because he never got the chance to say goodbye. Every sentence in the letter opened a door she had sealed shut. Tell Elizabeth I wanted to teach her to ride a bicycle. Elizabeth had learned on her own. She remembered falling, scraping her knees, looking back, and seeing no one. That memory hurt more now, because now she knew. Her father had imagined that moment. He had wanted to be there. The letter did not bring peace. It brought questions. Why did it take 20 years? Where did Lucas die? Did he suffer? Did he wait for a reply that never came? Anna blamed herself. If I had written back sooner, she whispered one night. Elizabeth snapped. You wrote every month, Mama, every month. But guilt is not logical. Anna replayed the past again and again. The last morning, the last smile, the last promise that meant nothing against a war. Elizabeth, now a grown woman, felt something different. Anger, not at her father, at the war, at governments, at borders drawn by men who never paid the price. She realized something terrifying. Her entire childhood had been shaped by an absence. Every birthday without a father. Every school event without applause. Every illness without a hand on her head. And all this time, Lucas's final words had been trapped in a bag, under a stranger's bed. One evening, Elizabeth asked a question Anna had avoided for decades. Do you think he was scared? Anna closed her eyes. Yes, she said, because he was human. That night, Anna dreamed of Lucas for the first time in years. Not as a soldier, but as the man who left. He stood at the door, young, untouched by war. He tried to speak. She woke up before he could. The letter did not close wounds. It reopened them, but it also did something else. It proved that Lucas had not disappeared quietly. He had fought against silence. He had written, and somewhere, across time and destruction, his words had survived, even when he had not. Outside, the world moved on. New generations grew up without knowing the sound of air raid sirens. But inside that small house, the war had returned, not with bombs, but with memory. The letter had given them a voice. Now they wanted a body, a place, a truth. Elizabeth took a train to the city archives. The building smelled of dust and paper. Thousands of forgotten lives stacked on metal shelves. She filled out forms with trembling hands. Name, Lucas Weber. Rank, infantryman. Unit, unknown. Status, missing. The clerk did not look surprised. Missing, he repeated softly. There are many. Files were brought out. Thin, incomplete, stained with age. Dates didn't match. Units were renamed. Front lines shifted. Men disappeared faster than records could follow. Elizabeth realized something painful. The war had not only killed men, it had erased them. She spent days there, reading names that were not her father's, seeing photographs of young men frozen forever at 20. Every face looked like it could have been Lucas. At night, she wrote everything down for her mother. Anna stayed home. She could not walk into the past again. For her, the search was emotional landmines. One wrong step, and everything would explode. Elizabeth found a lead, a transport list, a POW camp number, a date. 3 weeks after Lucas wrote the letter. Her heart raced. If he was alive after the letter, then he had waited. She visited former soldiers, old men with shaking hands and hollow eyes. Some remembered nothing. Some remembered too much. One man said quietly, "We stopped counting the days. Only the dead." Another whispered, "I think I remember him, a man who kept writing letters." That sentence broke something inside her, because it meant Lucas had not given up. He had written into the void. Back home, Anna listened as Elizabeth read aloud her findings. She clutched the letter to her chest. "For 20 years," she said. "I thought he forgot us." Elizabeth shook her head. "No, Mama, he was holding on." The search gave them hope. But hope is dangerous, because every answer brings another question, and every question risks destroying the image they had protected for decades. Where did Lucas die? Did he starve? Did he call their names? Or worse, did he survive and never find his way back? That thought haunted Anna, because hope can hurt more than certainty. Outside, spring arrived. Flowers bloomed without caring about the past. Inside, 2 women chased a man who existed now only in ink, memory, and a voice delayed by 20 years. They were no longer waiting. They were hunting the truth, and the truth, when found, would change everything. The archives finally led Elizabeth to a place no family ever wanted to imagine. A camp number, a location blurred by shifting borders, a name scratched in pencil beside the word transported. Prisoner of war. The train ride there felt endless. Each mile carried her deeper into a silence that history preferred not to speak about. The camp no longer existed. Only a clearing remained. Barbed wire shadows pressed into the soil, concrete foundations cracked by frost, and a wooden post leaning like a gravestone. An old local historian met her there. He spoke slowly, carefully, as if every word could reopen wounds. "Men arrived here already half dead," he said. "Hunger finished what bullets didn't." Elizabeth tried to imagine her father here. Lucas, who once fixed bicycles, who dreamed of teaching her to ride, standing in a line of men reduced to numbers. Food was thin soup. Work was endless. Winter was merciless. The historian pointed to a shallow depression in the ground. "Barracks," he said. "Overcrowded, no heat. At night, men whispered names of cities, of wives, of children they were afraid would forget them. Some carved letters into scraps of wood. Some wrote on stolen paper. Most stopped writing altogether, because writing reminded them of what they were losing." Elizabeth found a list. Prisoner numbers, dates, deaths recorded without causes. One line stopped her breath. Weber, L. Status, unconfirmed, unconfirmed. Not alive, not dead, just suspended. She learned what that meant. When a man was too weak to work, he was unconfirmed. When records failed, he was unconfirmed. When bodies were buried without names, they were unconfirmed. At home, Anna waited by the window. She felt it in her bones. The truth was getting closer. Elizabeth wrote that night. She did not soften the words. She described the cold, the hunger, the silence where screams should have been. Anna read the letter slowly. Her hands shook. "I dreamed he was cold," she whispered. "All these years, I dreamed he was cold." Elizabeth learned one more thing. A survivor's testimony mentioned a man who shared his bread, a man who kept talking about his wife and daughter, a man who believed letters could survive anything. The name wasn't written, but Elizabeth knew, because only one man would still believe that, after everything. Lucas had not survived by strength. He had survived by hope, and hope, in places like this, was both a weapon and a curse. As Elizabeth left the clearing, snow began to fall. Quiet, unforgiving, the same snow Lucas may have watched, wondering if anyone would ever know where he disappeared. Now they were close, close enough to feel the cold he felt, close enough to hear the silence he died inside. The wire was gone, but its shadow remained. Elizabeth almost missed him. The address was written in faded ink, passed to her by the historian as an afterthought. "Most don't like to talk," he had warned. "But this one, sometimes he remembers." The house was small, quiet, surrounded by overgrown grass. When the door opened, Elizabeth saw a man far older than his years, bent spine, clouded eyes, hands that never stopped shaking. He listened as she spoke her father's name, Lukas Weber. At first there was nothing. Then the man's face changed, slowly, painfully. "I remember him," he said. Those 3 words hit Elizabeth harder than anything she had read in the archives. He invited her inside. They sat in silence before he spoke again. "He shared his bread," the man said, "even when there was nothing left." He described Lucas not as a soldier, but as a presence, a man who spoke softly about home, a man who refused to forget names. When men stopped believing, the survivor whispered. He kept writing letters that would never be sent. Elizabeth felt her throat close. The survivor described the winter, how men stopped waking up, how guards stopped counting, how Lucas became weak, but never cruel, never desperate. "He asked me one thing," the man said, "if I survived, to remember him." There were no heroic last words, no final speech, just hunger, cold, and waiting. The survivor lowered his eyes. One morning, he didn't stand up. Elizabeth did not cry. Not yet, because part of her still wanted to believe that unconfirmed meant alive. But deep down, she knew. Back home, Anna waited. When Elizabeth told her, Anna did not scream. She nodded slowly, as if she had known all along. "I always felt when he left," she said, "that part of him stayed with us. And part of him stayed there." That night, Anna took out a box hidden for decades. Inside were unopened letters she had written to Lucas, letters she had never mailed, because the address stopped making sense. She handed them to Elizabeth. "He waited for my words," Anna said. "I waited for his body." Neither had arrived in time. Elizabeth understood something now. The war did not only kill Lucas. It stretched his death across 20 years, through silence, through hope, through waiting, and now, finally, through truth. The survivor's words closed one door, but they opened another. What does a family do when a man returns only as memory? The house became quieter after the truth, not the empty quiet of waiting, but the heavy quiet of knowing. Anna no longer checked the door at night. Elizabeth noticed it immediately. For 20 years, her mother had lived with an invisible habit, listening for footsteps that would never come. Now that habit was gone. In its place was something worse, stillness. They sat together at the table where the letter had first been opened. Between them lay the unopened envelopes Anna had saved. Elizabeth read them slowly. Each one began the same way. "My dear Lucas." They spoke of small things. The garden, Elizabeth's first day of school, a broken window fixed by a neighbor. Nothing heroic, just life continuing without him. Anna watched as her daughter read. "I thought," Anna said quietly, "that if I stopped writing, he would die for real." Elizabeth finally cried, not loudly, just tears that had waited decades for permission. She understood now. Her childhood wasn't stolen by war alone. It was shaped by love that never found its destination. Anna confessed something she had never said out loud. "I was angry at him," she whispered. "Sometimes I hated him for leaving me alone." Elizabeth took her hand. "He didn't leave," she said. "He was taken." They spoke about the future, something they had avoided for years. Elizabeth admitted she feared marriage, feared building a life that could disappear without warning. Anna admitted she feared happiness, because happiness felt like betrayal. The letter lay between them like a bridge. It did not answer every question, but it proved one thing. Lucas had loved them until the end. That knowledge did not erase the pain, but it changed its shape. That night, Anna lit a candle, not for a missing man, but for a dead one. It was the first time she allowed herself to use that word. "Goodbye," she whispered, not to forget him, but to stop waiting. Outside, the world moved forward. Inside, two women finally allowed themselves to grieve, not as victims of war, but as survivors of love. Letting go did not mean losing him. It meant carrying him differently. The memorial stood at the edge of town. Simple, cold, unforgiving. Stone did not cry. Stone did not remember birthdays. Stone only remembered names. Anna had avoided this place for years, because once a name is carved in stone, hope has nowhere left to hide. Elizabeth guided her mother slowly. Each step felt like walking backward through time. Families stood around them, some laying flowers, some touching names, some whispering prayers to men who never answered back. Anna's eyes searched the stone, line by line, name after name. Then she saw it. Weber, Lucas, missing in action. She did not collapse. She did not scream. She placed her hand on the cold surface and whispered his name, not as a question, but as a statement. Elizabeth noticed something strange. For the first time, her mother looked steady. Grief had finally found a place to stand. They learned later that missing in action was the final compromise of history. No body, no grave, just acknowledgement. Anna said softly, "At least the world knows he existed." That mattered more than she expected, because for 20 years, Lucas had lived only inside their house. Now he belonged to history too. Elizabeth realized something painful. History is neat. Private grief is not. A name on stone cannot describe hunger. It cannot explain letters unsent. It cannot show how a child grows up without a voice calling her name. But still, the stone mattered. They placed flowers, not grand, not dramatic, just simple white ones. As they turned to leave, Anna stopped. She looked back once more. "I forgive you," she said quietly, not to Lucas, to time, to war, to herself. On the way home, Elizabeth thought about generations yet to come. People who would pass this memorial without knowing the stories behind the names. She promised herself something. Lucas would not be just a name. He would be a story. A reminder that wars do not end when guns fall silent. They end decades later, in kitchens, in letters, in hearts still waiting. The memorial did not close the wound, but it stopped it from bleeding. Only one chapter remained, not about loss, but about what survives after everything else is gone. Years passed, quietly, not the kind of time that hurts, but the kind that teaches. Anna grew older. Her hands shook more. Her steps slowed. But her eyes were lighter, because waiting had finally ended. One spring afternoon, Elizabeth brought her mother to a small hill outside town, a place Lucas had once described in a letter long ago. "If I don't come back, find a place with trees." I always felt calm there. They sat beneath a tree. The wind moved gently. Birds did not know about war. Elizabeth took out the last letter. Not Lucas's, Anna's. The one she had written after reading his final words. The one she had never sent. She read it aloud. "My dear Lucas, I waited longer than I knew how. I was angry. I was afraid. And sometimes I forgot how to breathe. But our daughter grew strong. She remembers you, not as a ghost, but as a man who loved her before she ever knew his face." Anna closed her eyes. Tears fell, not from pain, but release. "I don't feel alone anymore," she whispered. Elizabeth understood then. Closure is not about answers. It is about permission. Permission to live. Anna passed away quietly a year later. No drama, no struggle, just a peaceful breath and silence. At her funeral, Elizabeth placed both letters together. Lucas's, Anna's. Two voices finally reunited. Decades too late. But together, years later, Elizabeth returned to the tree with her own child. She told the story, not of a soldier, but of a man who loved his family enough to write, even when the world was ending. She ended with one sentence. Wars don't just take lives, they delay love. As the sun set, the wind carried the leaves gently. No gunfire, no shouting, just peace. The letter had arrived. Not on time, but not too late.